Welcome to the first edition of City Connection for the new year. It's 2020. City Connection is the live television program with Grand Rapids Mayor Rosalind Bliss. With Community Media Center, I'm your host, Linda Gellasch. City Connection offers the community the opportunity to hear about efforts at City Hall and beyond, and also provides time with the mayor for your questions and comments later in the program. Today we will be welcoming into the studio Grand Rapids Emergency Administrator Allison Farole. Farole took on the new created role of Emergency Administrator in September of 2019, coming to Grand Rapids after serving in a similar role in Charlottesville, Virginia. Farole will fill us in on emergency preparedness initiatives and how this new position will engage in the community. Your opportunity to take part in the live conversation comes in the second half of the hour. You can do that by emailing cityconnection@grcmc.org, sending your tweets to @GRTV Access, or commenting at the GRTV Facebook page. City Connection is a collaboration between Community Media Center and the City of Grand Rapids and is broadcasting live today, January 6, 2020, here on Community Access Television Channel 24, live streaming at theRapidian.org and on GRTV's Facebook page. We'll be rebroadcasting this throughout the month on Channel 25. City Connection broadcasts live the first Monday of the month, 4 p.m. And now in studio with me is Grand Rapids Mayor Rosalind Bliss. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Well, did you take part in the ball drop? Were you officiating?
You know what, I wasn't.
Okay.
So I was out of town for the holiday. So I watched it a little bit, but I wasn't here, but I'm happy to see that it's back downtown.
So Rosa Park Circle, the place where Grand Rapids kicked off the new year 2020.
Yeah, there were lots of things going on downtown. So it was really fun to see all the pictures and the fireworks, even though my dog is terrified of fireworks.
Oh no.
Having them a couple times a year is okay.
Yeah.
So.
Well, with the new year, we have new people in office or new terms taking place. Tell a little bit about the new swearing in, the oaths of office that took place.
Yeah, so we did our oath of office on the last commission day in December, so December 17th. And with the swearing in, we welcomed our new second ward commissioner, Linda Gellasch. So she'll be joining the commission. Her first commission meeting will be tomorrow. But then we also swore in our new comptroller, Max France. So he was sworn in, and then we had 4 library commissioners who were sworn in, and then myself, and then Commissioner O'Connor and Commissioner Moody. So unlike, every city does it different based on their charter. And how we do it is we do the swearing in at our last meeting in December, but then the individuals start their service January 1. So the start of your next term is technically January 1st.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then also at the new year, when we hear 2020, we start thinking about the census, because this is a census year. Things are starting to gear up. This is such an important part of what goes on in our country.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. We have been working, the city has, in partnership with a lot of organizations in the community for quite some time now. Actually, for about a year, we've had a complete count committee, which is made up of about 65 to 70 individuals throughout the community. And then we have 6 subcommittees that really focus on certain areas. And we have been gearing up and planning for the census to make sure that everyone is counted in the city of Grand Rapids. As you said, it's an important thing that people participate in throughout the country. But what people don't realize is that census data is utilized in so many ways, at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. It's utilized for formulas, so funding formulas. They take into account census data, both at the state level and the federal level, not just for the city, but for schools and for community health centers.
So the funds we receive for that is based on the citizen count, the number of people in part.
Yeah, so even community development block grants and home dollars, which are part of HUD for housing and homelessness, all of that takes into account, and with the formula, census data is included. And then you have businesses, so economic development. A lot of businesses will look at census data when they're looking to move somewhere or expand somewhere. They're always looking at not just the census data for the city, but for the region, so what we call the MSA. They'll look at the MSA numbers to determine if there's a large enough population to support whatever, if it's a retail, if there's a large enough population to support what they want to sell, or if they're a company moving somewhere, will they have enough workers and talent? So the census data is used in so many ways. Transportation dollars, they look at census data.
Elected representation?
Oh, that's a big one, yes.
Yeah.
So as we go into redistricting, which will happen after the 2020 census, our representatives, all of that, how the districts are drawn, now they'll be drawn differently this year in the state of Michigan because of the ballot initiative that was passed. But with that said, it's still driven by population. So the number of folks who represent us is contingent on population.
Okay.
It's very, very important.
And what's the city doing as far as efforts of getting the word out there, what to do, where to go? I see a lot of now some public service announcements about hiring census workers.
Yeah. So the hiring of the census workers, that's being driven by the U.S. Census Bureau.
Okay.
But what we're doing internally, and then with a lot of partners in town, is we are looking at what can we do to encourage folks who historically have not participated in the census. How do we make sure that they participate? So at the city, we hired a full-time census ambassador, and then we have 3 part-time employees that we've hired temporarily to help us gear up and get the word out around the census. So we have materials, we set up a Facebook page, trying to really educate people about the importance of the census. They've been going out into specific neighborhoods and providing information, as well as identifying locations that can be used as a kiosk for people to complete their census. So a couple things about the census this year that's different is that the first opportunity to participate in the census, people will be asked to do it electronically. So we're very concerned about people who don't have access to the internet or they are unfamiliar with how to complete the form online. So there'll be hopefully kiosks and locations in neighborhoods like libraries and neighborhood associations where people can go and actually fill out the form electronically.
And will there be a census worker there to help them through the process?
Yeah, there won't necessarily be a worker, but the folks there within the organization will be trained. So we actually, the city is partnering with United Way. They also are focused on getting out the count, as we call it, for the census. So we'll be doing some trainings leading up to the census. The date for the census count is April 1. So it's going to be here before we know it. I should tell you a couple other things. So United Way, they have been giving out mini grants to organizations to help have people on the ground in neighborhoods doing grassroots efforts around educating people about the census. And then in the supplemental budget that was approved at the state level, there was funds allocated at the state level to help get out the count for the state of Michigan. So the state of Michigan feels very similar to the city of Grand Rapids in that they want everyone to be counted because so many of those state dollars are also, that we get from the federal government are also contingent on census data. So we'll hopefully be able to secure some of those funds from the state and then do some very targeted education, marketing, and communication to folks who live in the city.
There are a few kind of misconceptions or maybe some fears or worries about filling out the census. Can you address a couple of those?
Yeah, so the big one, and actually I'm glad it didn't move forward. There was a concern because there was initially a recommendation to add a question around citizenship onto the census. That has since been blocked and not allowed. So that question is not going to be on the census. I think the ultimate fear that people have is that the information that they put on the census will be shared with other federal departments. But if you look at the law is very, very clear, and it has been for decades, that census data is confidential. And so we're going to try to communicate that the Census Bureau cannot share any of the census data, any of the specific data. What they do is they aggregate the data. So when you look at census data, it's all aggregated by census tract. So this many people live in a household, so it's all aggregated. It's not individually specific. So I can find out information about my neighborhood, but I wouldn't be able to pull up my personal responses. But people are concerned that that information will be shared with other departments, and particularly, the Office of ICE and Homeland Security.
So people migrating to the country might be concerned. People that, because of maybe poverty, have a lot of people living in their house might be concerned, and that's really not tracked at all through the census.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the word we're really trying to spread that all of the information will be kept confidential. Okay. And we've been having ongoing conversations we have a point person for the city that works at the department, the Bureau of, for the Census, and they have been very clear. We've brought in attorneys to talk about legally, the kind of walk us through the acts and the legal language that very clearly states that the census is confidential.
Okay. So you said count date is April 1. Does that,
Yes,
it doesn't mean it
April
all
1.
happens then? Does that mean it kicks off or concludes? or
Yep,
how
that's
does
when
that
they're going to ask people to fill out the form by April 1. And then after that, so you'll get a notice in the mail. You'll be asked to go online, complete the census. If you don't, you'll get something in the mail at your home. Some folks that are in harder to count areas will still get a paper form to fill out. But then if you don't respond by a certain date in April, then they'll do a follow-up, and then they'll send somebody to your home to knock on your door and try to get you to complete the form.
Okay, so reminders might be going out quite soon, or
Yeah,
notices?
March. They'll likely, you'll start seeing things in your mail in March, but you'll also start to see a lot of media and campaigns really gearing up probably the end of February, 1st of March.
A location where people can go if they just have some of these questions
Yeah.
at the U.S. Census Bureau, is that the best spot, or what do you think?
You know, they can go to the website. It's very thorough, but it's also has a lot of information. You can come to the city. The city has a website we've set up and a Facebook page. In fact, I'll post that on my page so that people can go there. And then we've been doing education at a lot of local nonprofits, as well as all of our libraries. So folks that are working at your local library, they have information that they can share with you. And then we have flyers and handouts that we've printed off that are out in a lot of the organizations that we partner with. So neighborhood associations, you know, Baxter Community Link Up, you know, Hispanic Chamber, Hispanic Center. We have information in multiple languages. That's another thing about the census, is that you can click and you can answer the census in a number of different languages. So that is made available as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as we're thinking about New Year things, city started a new recycling program,
Yeah.
not completely new, but a couple changes specifically
Yeah.
when it comes to plastic shopping bags and shredded paper.
Yes. So this was actually a decision made by the county. So the county runs the recycling facility, just as the county runs the waste to energy site. And so they were having some pretty significant issues with the machine. If you've been to the recycling facility, it's a single stream recycling facility. So all the trash goes into one spot, and then it goes through a number of conveyor systems where the product is sorted. And what they found is that plastic bags, a couple things. People were putting lots of things in the plastic bags and then putting them in their recycle bin. So then when they get there, they have to manually dump everything out. So they want everything to be separate and not in plastic bags. And then the plastic bags, they blow up and they get caught in things, and so they're really problematic. And the same thing with shredded paper. They're finding that it was jamming up a lot of the processes in the recycling plant. So for plastic bags, a lot of stores, including Meijer, you can recycle them there. Of course, I'm always encouraging people not to use plastic bags at all, period. You know, use paper, use reusable ones, you know, look for alternatives. And then for shredded paper, you know, I know that there are paper gators and things like that that will take them.
They will take that. Okay.
Yeah, but it's just a little more challenging to find a place for a shredded paper.
Okay. Then the last little piece is Christmas trees. There's
Yes.
opportunity to drop those off at some area parks
Yep.
for the rest of the month, I believe.
Yeah, so it's that time of year where people have their Christmas trees and they're taking them down and getting rid of them. So they have a couple options. They can take them to one of 4 parks in the city, or you can leave them by your curb and get a tag. So you can get a tag, $2.50, and you can just tag it, and then our crews will pick it up right out at your curb. So.
All right. Looks like drop-off parks are Riverside, McKay, JC's, Lincoln, and Huff Park. Sound right?
Yep. So we tried to spread them out through the city.
All
So a
right.
couple on the west side, east side, and southeast side.
All right. Well, we're going to take a break now, and when we come back with the mayor will be Allison Farole. She'll talk about emergency management here in Grand Rapids.
Have you ever wondered how you can impact youth in your community? Do you turn on the news and often wonder, how can I get involved to make a difference? If you answered yes to either of these questions, you're a committed stakeholder in the future health and wellness of Kent County. Hi, I'm Brian Hartle from the Kent County Health Department, and I'm a proud member of the Kent County Prevention Coalition. The KCPC is made up of people and organizations who are passionate about seeing Kent County win. Together, we have translated passion into purpose and purpose into action. The result of this synergy is collective impact. An integral component of the success of the KCPC is its partnerships with community organizations. It takes a village to impact community change. We believe that wisdom, resources, power, and expertise lies within our community. As 2019 comes to a close, we wanted to take a moment to reflect on a few noteworthy areas of impact that the KCPC has made in its journey of innovation, commitment, and empowerment. This year, over 1,200 youth convened at DeVos Place for the 8th annual Above the Influence Kent County Youth Summit. This massive event was one for the books, with over 100 adult volunteers assisting in the effort. Over 127,000 people tuned in to view KCPC monthly PSAs like this one in this year alone. Many hands make light work. Over 14,500 in-kind hours were donated to the work of the coalition. Team KCPC is bringing the message of prevention to screens nationwide with over 194,500 impressions spanning all social media platforms. We are glad to say our work is both life-changing and effective. Nearly 1 million lives were impacted this year by the work of the KCPC. A huge thank you goes out to our member organizations and volunteers. We appreciate your countless hours, commitment, and dedication. If you heard something that piqued your interest or have always wanted to roll up your sleeves and help move the vision forward, we invite you to participate in the movement. Because after all, purpose requires partnership. You are invited to our next coalition meeting. The KCPC General Assembly meets on the fourth Tuesday of each month from 12 o'clock to 1:30 p.m. For a full schedule of meetings, events, and locations, please visit the master calendar section of our website at kcpreventioncoalition.org. I hope to see you at the next meeting.
Hello and welcome back. We have with us Allison Farole,
Yep.
Italian name.
Yes.
And she is our new emergency manager administrator at the City of Grand Rapids. So it's a new position that's been created.
Yep.
You've been with us for a few months now.
Working on just past month 3.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So we're just going to spend a little time learning more about you
Sure.
and then the position
Yep.
and what it means and maybe even, what citizens can expect
Sure.
and why it's important. So
Most definitely.
maybe to start off, since you're new to Grand Rapids,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your background and where
Sure.
you came from and what led you to our city.
So I'm born and raised Southern California girl, ironically, and I actually lived in the Deep South for 11 years after graduating undergrad. Stumbled upon emergency management very randomly. Originally was actually a broadcasting major, wanted to be a political correspondent actually. But I've been working in emergency management now for almost 7 years, and previously, before coming here to Grand Rapids, I was the emergency management coordinator for the city of Charlottesville, the University of Virginia, and Albemarle County down in Virginia. So I did that for about 6.5 years.
Okay, nice. And
Yeah.
so you saw this position,
I did.
and what enticed you about our city and coming from Virginia? I mean, Virginia's a beautiful state, but I always say Grand Rapids is better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious.
You know, early on in the year of 2019, or at least about quarter way through, I wanted to learn about emergency management in a different state. So emergency management is one of those fields where it's very general as far as how it all works at a high level. But all I knew is how it works in Virginia, and I was really looking to come to a different community so I can grow professionally as an emergency manager, learn a little bit about a different part of the country that I haven't lived in yet. I'm from the West Coast, lived in the Deep South, a little bit on the East Coast, and so now it was kind of a good opportunity for me to go to the Midwest that I knew absolutely nothing about, and saw this as an opportunity to take my experience as the emergency management coordinator in Charlottesville and went through a lot of fabulous adventures down there to really come here and to help Grand Rapids really help build a program so that the city of Grand Rapids can be ready for anything that can happen.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. Well, we're glad to have you.
Yes.
I know when Chief Lehman led the search for this position, he was the one that recommended this position, and we added it in our budget that was approved by the City Commission last year in May. And that really came from the experiences that we had with the polar vortex and really with a number of extreme weather events we've had. Chief Lehman took the lead on a number of those, and I was able to be in the emergency communication office with them and kind of see everything take place. And I think he recognized, and I think a number of us who participated recognized, we need to be proactive, but also be able to respond when something happens that we're not prepared for in a really thoughtful way and as quickly as possible. So that, I think, was the impetus for the position, and he was really excited that you applied and was excited to hire you. So for folks who are not familiar with the position, why don't you talk a little bit about what it encompasses?
Yeah, so emergency management is one of those things where I'm I'm behind the scenes. You don't necessarily see me, but on the day-to-day level, I do try and work hard to put a face to the Office of Emergency Management. When things are not going on, I'm really working hard to build relationships with our internal and external stakeholders at the local level, and then also really getting to know the community and figuring out where those gaps are and kind of figuring out where I need to work with either individuals or organizations or community leaders to make sure that our community is ready before, during, and after a major disaster. And really it's that relationship building that's key. All of my work, I can't do my job without everybody else that's involved, and it's really not a handful of government leaders that really helps me, it's every single person. And then when things are happening and there is an incident going on, I'm running what's called the Emergency Operations Center. So making sure that that Emergency Operations Center is gathering proper information so that we can make decisions as a government, bringing in proper resources so that we can respond effectively to any issues that are arising in our community. And then really the big piece, that one thing that we don't really work hard on I think just in government, and as you'll see across the country from other disasters, is the recovery aspect of it. That is the piece that really is really important and lasts forever. And that, to make sure that we can recover from something, really is all about what I'm doing today and what we're doing as a community today to understand how we can help each other and making sure that we can get through anything that happens.
Yeah. So a couple good examples, I think, from the experience that happened almost a year ago now, so last February. We had the horrible ice storm and windstorm. We had thousands and thousands of families without power, some of them for 5-6 days. And we were identifying, locations for warming shelters, and then we realized, GRPS was closed down and the universities were closed down, and so we had students without food, and we were trying to figure out how do we get food to families that rely on food. So we were working with Kids Food Basket. So it was all this, there was a number of things we were identifying, especially in day 2 and 3, that we had to try to figure out as quickly as possible. So I know the Red Cross was actively involved, and we were working with the Rapid. So that's the kind of planning that you're doing right now, figuring out who those people are to identify, what do you do, and who are those resources we can call on in, not just during an emergency, but then afterwards.
Most definitely. And, it's not only just, we're looking at those vulnerable pieces of our community, and they vary depending on the type of incident that we have and the type of season we're in and things like that. But, it's hard when a community that goes through something where we're out of power for 5 days. That's a long time, and really trying to, just the everyday individual, making sure that they know how does that impact their life is really important. And that's just, what kind of food do you have in the house that you can eat that you don't have to cook? Do you have activities for your children to help you get through those few days without power? Do you have extra blankets in the house to stay warm? Things like that. So it's really important to really take a few moments, step back, and really understand how these things can really impact you. And that's part of what I'm looking to do, is really help build that understanding and give that education piece for our community here in Grand Rapids.
And when it comes to crises, I know we talk a lot about natural disaster, but there's also a fear that many people have in light of the world we live in today, that there's going to be some type of massive shooter or bombing or some other type of violent event in the community. And I know we've talked about that internally, and the work that you're doing is a plan for any type of disaster. So you're working not just with the fire department, but also with the police department as well.
Yeah, so one of the big things I'm working on right now is developing what's called an emergency operations plan. It's all hazards, whole community plan that really incorporates all departments in the city of Grand Rapids, and then external stakeholders. And that it could also be our private utilities, our nonprofits, our faith-based organizations here in town, and making sure that we have this general plan that can really help guide us on who to bring to the table for certain situations or certain gaps that we have and issues. And so that's one thing that is the bread and butter of an emergency management program, is having an emergency operations plan. And that's kind of the guidebook of how we're going to do things. And that's definitely something I'm working on right now. It'll take us about a year to get there.
Okay.
But we'll have one soon.
Well, we know that the planning is critical.
It is.
And that then when you're in that moment, you can pull that out, and everyone knows exactly what the expectation is, and they can come to the table. And I know, you talked about the EOC office, and it is amazing how many people come around that table to respond, and every half hour get updates on what progress have we made, what are the current crises, and then how are we going to respond. So I'm glad you're here.
Yes.
I know that the city as a whole, the organization as a whole, but also the city as a whole will be better off because of the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I'm having a lot of fun.
Good. Well, we're going to take a break, and then I know we'll have some Q&A. I'm sure Linda has some additional questions for you.
Sounds great.
So with that, we'll take a short break and be right back.
Hi, my name is Haley DeMock, and I am an intern here at GRTV. Every week, I get to participate in a number of things around the station. I have gotten hands-on experience in setting up a TV studio, learning about sound and lighting equipment, and working with top editing programs. This internship works closely with local nonprofit organizations to film weekly public service announcements to help them in their efforts. Along with a collaborative team environment, GRTV interns are allowed to pitch and implement project ideas to work on during their time here. As a film student at Grand Valley State University, I have found GRTV to be a wonderful place to grow in my film skills. The station has worked with me, making it possible to focus on my area of study, post-production editing, while still giving me experience working in other areas of the film industry. I also get college credit. Sounds like a great opportunity, right? Along with the skills learned through the internship, you also get a GRTV membership. Perks of the membership include access to the studio, editing suites, and film equipment, and a discount at the Wealthy Theater in downtown Grand Rapids. If you're interested in becoming an intern here at GRTV, visit grcmc.org. That's grcmc.org. Click the About tabs and scroll down to the job and internships. We hope to see you here.
Welcome back to City Connection. I'm in studio with Mayor Rosalind Bliss, and we're also talking with the newly hired Emergency Management Administrator, Allison Farole. It's a new position for the city that began somewhere in September. Is that what we were saying?
That is correct, yep.
Well, thanks for all the information, and now that you've been in the West Coast, the Deep South, the East, welcome to the Midwest.
Thank you.
So I want to talk a little bit about your most recent position before this, and that was in Charlottesville, Virginia. And Charlottesville, Virginia suffered a pretty severe tragedy a little over a year, a little more than that ago.
Mm-hmm.
But talk a little bit about that incident that was a march where it went violent, and how you learned from that, and how your city responded, and what information, what kind of new experience you bring to the city of Grand Rapids.
Yeah. So I was the emergency management coordinator down in Charlottesville. I was actually promoted 6 weeks before the August 12th Unite the Right rally. And that it was definitely a tragic event that happened in that community. One thing though is that looking at that the tragedy that happened and what went wrong is I'm very fortunate that we were able to gather everybody to the table that was necessary. So that was local law enforcement. So we had 3 different law enforcement agencies in that community. So there was a city, county, and university law enforcement agencies involved, state police, and then 2 fire departments. I'm making sure that, and then the 3 jurisdictions as a whole, the city, the county, the university, all came together afterwards and really took those lessons learned and figured out that we need to work together and really under a unified command structure. Having one incident action plan and making sure that everyone was on the same page of what was going to happen and how we were going to handle situations moving forward. And really worked hard for that whole 8 months to a year after that incident to bring the proper training to the table for all public safety and just local government folks that were working in the Emergency Operations Center or on the field to make sure they knew how to actually to do their job properly during another incident if that were to happen. We also did a lot of exercising, making sure that we were able to run an EOC properly. We did a lot of changes to the EOC structure down there after that incident and making sure that we were having a more conducive and well-run emergency operations center so that we were able to gather information properly, share without any silos, and then also making sure we were able to communicate resource needs to each other as well.
Okay. Well, when we bring it back to Grand Rapids and start talking about this, we have a question from Suzanne that says, how is this city, and specifically the police, prepared for demonstrations and marches? And this is for both of you, really.
Yeah, so I can't necessarily speak directly as for the police department, but I will say as my role as the emergency manager here for the city of Grand Rapids, one of things that I do in this job is to make sure that we bring the right people to the table. So that would be the police, the fire department, EMS, Public Works, our legal counsel here for the city, making sure that we're all working together to be prepared for any potential demonstrations that we have going on, and making sure that we're able to still ensure that those that are demonstrating are safe and able to have a voice, but also making sure that as a public safety entity we are working together. So we have one plan, one incident action plan, and that we're all on the same page on how we're going to make sure that everyone that are participating, and then also the community as a whole, is safe and able to stay protected during that.
Yeah. And then as you you're 4 months in the position here, and as you kind of look through processes and policy that are in place here, what have you been seeing needs to be added? What are you working on?
Lots of things.
Okay.
Technically, the city doesn't have a full-blown emergency management program, so that's what I'm doing right now, is building that program. It won't happen overnight. It'll take a couple years to get there. But one of the big things that I'm working on, as mentioned earlier, is what's called an emergency operations plan. That's all hazards, whole community plan that really gives that high-level guidebook of what we're supposed to do. Who do we bring to the table? It involves emergency support functions, so focuses on what type of actions and entities we should be working together for, like transportation or public works or communications, things like that. And really, actually, that plan is not just for government entities or nonprofits or private organizations here in the community. It also mentions how individuals in our community is what they're supposed to do to be ready. And it really emphasizes the need for personal preparedness, and that is also emphasized in that emergency operations plan. So it's not just us as a city, as a local government to do all the work, it's everybody from the top to the bottom, and anybody that lives in this community has a role in making sure that we are ready for anything to happen.
As you come to a new area of the country, would you anticipate being some of the differences that you haven't met before and that expose you to some new challenges?
You know, I came from a community where I served 3 different jurisdictions, and now I'm serving 1, which is a whole different world for me. But also every state's different, and I think in just kind of our cultures, how things operate at a state level. Everything's mandated at the federal level when it comes to emergency management, but then also how it's interpreted is always different as well. And trying to just kind of understand what that all is, and really, every community has its own vibe to it, and I'm having a lot of fun trying to just understand what Grand Rapids is all about. And also understanding where our gaps are and our issues and our needs are. What is a concern here in Grand Rapids is completely different than where I came from in Virginia. Also maybe from California where I grew up. And so it's actually really makes my job a lot of fun to really kind of get an understanding of how I need to be as an emergency manager as a whole, but also making sure that I'm working with everyone as close as I can to get them to understand what they need to do to make my job easier, but also to get them prepared for any disaster that can happen in this community.
Yeah. Well, I can attest to that. During the polar vortex last year, and I was in EOC, I learned a lot about calling for a state of emergency and that entire process, which is driven by state law. And it's my job as mayor to make that decision, and there wasn't really clear guidelines, and you had to weigh the pros and cons and what benefit that would be, but you don't want to make people feel frightened or feel like we're not prepared. So I remember, I must have been in there 7, 8, 9 hours, really looking at, okay, not just learning about the process, but really identifying, okay, what is the benefit of calling a state of emergency, and how will the community benefit from that? And I did end up calling a state of emergency, and what that allowed us to do is we were able to get resources from across the state to come and help us with debris cleanup, trees, power lines. So we were just able to, within 18 hours, have crews here that helped us clean up much, much more quickly. We were able to pick up debris that families were able to pull to the side of the road. So I think we were able to quadruple our efforts in a very short time. But it's a hard decision because it's costly, but
What's the downside of calling for a state of emergency?
Well, there's specific requirements that you have to meet. So the state of Michigan has an individual assigned for emergencies, and they walk you through whether an incident meets the eligibility of being a state of emergency, and then it's up to you. And then you have to really identify, do we have enough resources to respond on our own versus calling others in, and then looking at the cost of that. So we accrued well over $700,000 worth of expenses during that 10-day period, just trying to respond, calling in additional crews and OT and additional resources to come and help us do the cleanup.
So as you kind of describe that sounds like it addresses a bit of the recovery that Allison was referencing earlier. And I just wondered, Allison, if you could maybe talk a little bit more about recovery, and take a sip, that's fine. But Mayor and I were just kind of discussing a little bit about how the emergency management plan can really include that recovery.
Yeah, and with one thing.
One thing.
Coughing fit.
It had to happen.
I do apologize.
No problem.
I think this is where the education piece is really huge, and trying to get people to understand that I was doing so good. Really, so like what you're describing is really interesting, and kind of one of the reasons why I like moving to a different state and learning about how emergencies are declared. A local emergency as a city really doesn't necessarily have negative impact. As a state, it's very hard here in Michigan to get that. But it's also understanding for community members to understand the importance of not necessarily how a declaration will impact them or what it can bring to them. Insurance is actually one of the number one things they need to look at. So because I actually just had a question the other day in regards to the high wind event that happened here in September, was trying to understand, well, is there FEMA money? No, there's really no FEMA money, and actually FEMA money is really small when we do have a federal declaration. And really, one of the things as an individual and a community and a resident here is making sure you have proper insurance, because that's really what's going to help them. Right. So really coming into your recovery aspect of making sure that you have proper renter's insurance, homeowner's insurance. We have a lot of flooding in this community, but I've heard folks, well, I don't live in the flood zone, so I don't need that. Not necessarily true. So making sure you have flood insurance to cover you for that 1 in 100 year event that could all of a sudden impact you. So I think, and that's one thing I'm excited about, is getting out and really educating folks on what they need to know and how it works to make sure that they're ready, and to help them recover, because I know that I myself and as a government, we want to help people as much as we can, but there's only so much we can do. And then one of those things is making sure they understand what they need to have ahead of time, and insurance is probably the number one piece of the recovery aspect that's huge, at least getting them back up on their feet.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting too. I mean, so I'm in my 14th year on the commission, and I would say, especially in the last 5 years, we have seen, and my personal opinion is related to climate change, but the extreme weather events, whether it's the high winds, or we've had tornadoes touch down, or we've had the flooding. I mean, even right now, all the rivers are high right now. I was out yesterday, I went out to Millennium Park and took a walk with my dog, and there's entire streets closed down because of flooding, that the river is completely over the roadway, and even educating people about that, about don't drive through standing water, how dangerous that can be. We are just experiencing, in my opinion, more and more severe events throughout the entire year, whether it's the storm in September, we had a storm in July, we had the storm in February, we had flooding in the spring. It's just getting much more common.
And Allison, do you see your role wherever you've been changing a little bit with the climate change, or changing quite a bit?
I think emergency managers are becoming busier. So their job never ends. And I think with climate change, it's really, the recovery piece is becoming more focused, because it's happening more and more, because more localities are becoming impacted by major disasters. But also it's happening more frequently, so there's less time to recover just and do day-to-day work, I think. And then also, it's really important for us to find different ways to get to everybody in the community at various ways, to educate them on the importance of what they need to be doing ahead of time, because we can't necessarily help everybody right away. It definitely is, it's changing the role as an emergency manager, but I think also it's emphasizing the need for emergency managers and to have a strong staff under emergency management, to making sure communities can get through things.
Okay. So as we wrap up, do you have any contact information or source for information should somebody have questions here in the community?
Yeah, they can reach me by email. afarole@grcity.us is the best way to get a hold of me. And you can always also find my information on, I believe, on the website as well for Grand Rapids.
The city's website, great. Well, welcome to Grand Rapids as the new Emergency Management Administrator.
As I had a coughing fit on site.
Hey,
that's great.
It's all right. It happens. It's winter.
We're all going to be there any second now. Well, Allison Farole with the City of Grand Rapids, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll take a break now.
The Rapidian for the community provides an alternative.
To be the eyes of somebody who's not there.
It's more honest, more authentic, and more true.
And you do have the freedom to talk about things because they're things that need to be talked about, not because they'll get readers or viewers or clicks.
Sometimes it feels intimidating to write a news story or to write a story about a community issue. What I love about the Rapidian is that they make it really simple and easy.
So it's not like you have to meet this deadline by this time.
I'll be eating a sandwich in one hand and then I'm like typing in the other.
I love the freedom to be able to write from wherever.
I think it's a really powerful experience when people are able to tell their story and to be heard.
Anyone can have a voice.
Anybody can speak.
It's a platform for the community to tell its own story in a very authentic way, and that's powerful.
The community has to be involved in order for it to be sustainable. And so it tells you something about our community.
Welcome back to City Connection, and here with Mayor Rosalind Bliss. We want to say thanks to Allison Farole. She was here with us to talk about the new role of Emergency Management Administrator. Mayor, we already have a question, and it kind of follows up on our previous conversation on the census, and this is a basic. It says, is the online census form secure? How is the data collected and kept confidential?
Yeah. So it is secure, and we'll have, so we get all of our information from the Census Bureau. So it is secure and it is confidential through their protections that they have in place. So I can get more detail, or I can make sure that we have that on our website, because that's a very good question. The technical side of it, I know that they went through all of the IT and firewalls and, security system that they have embedded in the system. But that's a little bit outside of my area of expertise to get down to that level of detail. But I do know that they have, and they are going around throughout not just our state, but really the country, talking about the security of not just the system, but the data that is collected.
Okay. Yeah. And are you saying there's a place on the city's website too for census information?
There is. We have a web page that I will make sure that I get to you. And then we also have a Facebook page, and we've been populating that with information. And some of that is information we get directly from the Census Bureau, but then also it's some of the information that we're creating that is more Grand Rapids specific.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to get back to some of the topics for the city.
And we can talk about that next month, too.
That would be great, because as we get closer to that, what is it called, count date? Something like that? All
April 1.
April 1. All right, I wanted to ask a little bit about some of the, there's been a lot of city surveys recently, and one of them had to do with public safety and trust in the police department, and I understand that data's been collected. Maybe it's not fully into a report yet, but tell a little bit about what we can look forward to on hearing more about that.
Yeah, so this was actually started under Chief Verhinsky when he was here, and it's a program run by an organization called Elucid. And they collect data through a number of different mechanisms, phone calls, text message, online, and they ask specific questions about how safe people feel, and specific questions about our police department's response and overall safety. So they started doing that. They look at the data quarterly to see if there is change, and they drill down to a neighborhood level, so they can get a sense of what neighborhoods have a higher sense of safety versus others, and then they can drill down. So some of the preliminary information that was shared with the commission was that, kind of those scores of how safe people feel, and the most recent one was that there was 68% of the people who responded said that they felt safe in their neighborhood, which is good. I'm concerned about the, 32% that really don't feel safe, and what we can do to make sure that their neighborhoods are safe. Having a safe city and making sure every neighborhood is safe and that people feel safe in their homes and in their neighborhood and in their neighborhood parks is a top priority. So really now I think the question is, how do we drill down and identify, okay, the neighborhoods where people are reporting that they don't feel safe, what is the crux of the issue, and are there some things that we need to do differently? And unfortunately with data, you don't always get that, but we coupled that with a community-wide survey, which was longer. I took it. It took me a good 20-25 minutes to complete, so it was a longer survey. We used a different company for that, and it was a survey that asked questions on all of our city services, from yard waste to recycling to refuse to streets to fire department, police department, across the board. And that was, like I said, a much more detailed survey. Most cities, larger cities anyway, do a community survey regularly where they get feedback from the community, and then they set goals on areas that they're not doing well, and then they measure again for improvement. This is the first community survey of this kind that the city has ever done, so this will be our baseline data. So that survey finished up in December, and we should have that data made available this month. And then what we'll do is we'll take some of the data that is related to our strategic plan, because some of our strategic plan, how we're going to measure the goal, is with the community survey. So we'll identify those pieces and we'll put it into our dashboard. So we'll have the survey responses available, but then also if you go to the dashboard that looks at our strategic plan that has outlined our 6 pillars, which identify the objectives and goals that we have, you'll be able to see some of the data collected as outcomes for those goals.
Okay.
Yeah, does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
It does. Just going back a little bit to the public safety one, you mentioned the 68 rating when it comes to feeling safe in the area. The second part to that was rating maybe confidence or police department rating of sorts, slightly higher. It was 69%, but I saw the police chief's kind of response to that, Chief Payne's response to that, and it was kind of like along the lines of his recent efforts to really kind of embed and be a part of and familiar with neighborhoods, police officers, that really kind of go into the heart of that question.
Yeah, Chief Payne, this has been, I mean, I have a ton of respect for him. He's doing a good job. This has been a top priority of his, is how does he, not just he get out in the community. We did add additional police officers, so he extended the community policing into the evenings and on weekends. So we were able to do some shifting of staff there. And, he's also working really closely with the new position, which is the Office of Oversight, figuring out how do we come alongside and really build meaningful relationships with community, and then build on trust, which we've talked about for a long time, not just in this space, but also in the community.
It's kind of quick to say so because this concluded in December, but do you see some movement with the new chief's efforts?
Yeah, the Chief Payne's been in the community a long time. He has a lot of already really well-established relationships. I know he's identifying people in the community that he's meeting with regularly. I think that's a very positive thing. And then also he is out and about himself, talking to people, building relationships. I feel like he has a pretty good pulse of what's going on throughout the community. I did, at the last week in November, myself and our city manager, Mark Washington, he and I did a ride along with the chief for a few hours, and we talked about different parts of the city, areas where we've seen an uptick in crime, and what are some things that we can do about that. He's also looking at technology, so you may have read this in the paper. He's looking at, can we use drones to get to an incident more quickly and have eyes on an incident before officers are able to respond. A lot of cities are starting to use drones. Our fire department uses drones. And then also he brought up the conversation again about ShotSpotter. Do we invest in technology that would allow us to identify gunfire in neighborhoods where we've seen an increase in discharge of firearms?
Now, was that an audio solution, or was there more to it than that?
Yeah, so the technology picks up on, there's basically, kind of 3 towers, and it will pick up on gunfire and then report that back so an officer can respond even before a 911 call comes in. Or sometimes, there's gunfire and we don't even get the call right away until afterwards, or we find out that someone has been shot because they show up at an emergency room, but we weren't necessarily notified of that. So there are cities, again, throughout the country that use ShotSpotter to try to target and be on scene more quickly when there is gunfire. So the chief brought that up at our, the full city commission had a planning session in December, and the chief brought up both ShotSpotter and drones during that conversation and said that he wanted to spend some more time exploring those options and would be bringing that back for further discussion this year. So I anticipate it'll be part of our discussion, especially going into budget.
Okay.
So no decisions have been made, but I think the chief is trying to he's trying to identify all of the potential opportunities to respond more quickly and to address safety concerns in the city.
All right. 2 other points we'll get to before we wrap up.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I read that the Hartside neighborhood is now going to receive a public restroom.
Yes.
And talk a little bit about the importance of that and the fact that there wasn't one already.
Yeah, so this comes from a long process that we've gone through with the Hartside neighborhood, looking at a plan for Hartside and where there's an opportunity or need, and then how can we potentially be a part of solving it. And so there was a list of priorities that came through a planning process. They included things like having access to a public restroom so that people have a place to go. Lighting, so they did a whole lighting analysis and found that there are pockets of Division Street in the Hartside neighborhood where it's very, very dark. And so there's a whole list of things. So we have been working with some neighbors in Hartside, the City of Grand Rapids, and the DDA. And we identified a kind of a portable restroom that can be cleaned and utilized. It's used in not just other cities in the country, but internationally in other countries. And we're looking at installing that yet this year, probably in the spring. And it'll be on the corner of Weston and Division. And it's not technically an outhouse. It's a little more. Let me try to explain it to you. It's like a silver kind of cube. It's larger. You saw the photo.
It's better than a phone booth.
It's better than a phone booth. And so it'll be able to, and then our ambassadors who are downtown that help with the cleanup and beautification, they will be charged with making sure that it's clean. And so they'll be checking on it regularly throughout the day.
Okay, about 20 more seconds to go, but just want to mention World of Winter Festival coming up next weekend.
Yeah, next weekend. So gear up to embrace winter, as I say. We're a 4-season city, and we should love that about our city. And so World of Winter kicks off next week, and every weekend there are really fun things being planned all throughout downtown. So I encourage you to come on out, enjoy winter. There's going to be a beautiful art exhibit on North Monroe that we're bringing in that will be interactive and beautiful, especially at night with lights and with music. So get out and enjoy this season. Don't stay tucked away inside, but really get out there and enjoy what the winter brings. Yeah.
Great. Well, Mayor Bliss, thanks for another great show of City Connection. We'll be back next month. This is City Connection on GRTV Livewire Channel 24, and that wraps us up for this month.